Charlie Munger once said the first $100,000 is the hardest money you'll ever make. And he was worth over $2 billion when he said it. That's strange. Why would a billionaire care about a number that, to him, is basically pocket change? Because he knew something most people don't. Money doesn't just grow steadily as you save more of it. It crosses invisible lines, exact dollar thresholds, where the entire system starts treating you differently, and where the math itself starts working in your favor instead of against you. Here's the gap. Most people assume wealth is a smooth, gradual climb, a little better every year. It isn't. There are specific breakpoints, and until you cross one, almost nothing changes, no matter how hard you're working. So where exactly are those breakpoints? And what actually happens the moment you cross one? There are 3 net worth levels that quietly rewire how banks, institutions, and even the people close to you treat you. Miss them, and you'll keep grinding without ever feeling the shift. That's what this video is about. My name is Alex, and if you've ever felt like you're doing everything right, but still not getting anywhere, stay with me, because the problem isn't your effort. It's that you haven't hit the line yet. I'm going to show you exactly where those 3 thresholds sit, and what changes the instant you cross each one. Once you understand this, you'll stop guessing at your progress and start recognizing the real signals that you've actually moved up a level. And the first thing to understand is that the number everyone uses as the starting line is already wrong. Why the average net worth lies. Jenna Alvarez, a physical therapist in Denver, once did a quick Google search that ruined her whole afternoon. She typed in average American net worth, and the number that popped up was $1.06 million. She sat with that for a second. She and her husband had worked hard, saved consistently, and still weren't anywhere close to $1 million. So she closed the laptop and told herself the obvious thing. She was behind. Here's the problem. That number is technically true, and also almost completely useless. To understand why, you have to separate 2 words that get used like they mean the same thing: average and median. The average takes every household in the country, adds up their net worth, and divides by the total number of households. The median does something different. It lines every household up from poorest to richest and finds the one standing exactly in the middle. That middle household represents where a typical family actually sits, and that number is currently around $192,700, not $1 million, $192,700. So how does the average end up more than 5 times higher than the median? Follow the math. Picture a room with 99 regular people whose net worth sits around $200,000 each. Then one billionaire walks in. The moment he does, the average net worth of everyone in that room rockets into the tens of millions, even though 99 out of the 100 people in the room didn't get a single dollar richer. That's exactly what's happening at the national level. A small number of extremely wealthy households, people worth tens or hundreds of millions, are yanking the average upward, the same way one kid hanging off a curtain rod pulls the whole curtain crooked. Everyone else is still standing where they were. This is not a small statistical footnote. It's the reason so many hardworking people feel like financial failures for no real reason. When Jenna read average net worth, $1 million, her brain didn't process it as a skewed statistic. It processed it as a verdict. And that's the trap. The word average sounds neutral, almost scientific. It doesn't feel like it's lying to you. But in a country where wealth is this lopsided, the average isn't describing your reality. It's describing the reality of people who own commercial real estate portfolios and stock positions worth 8 figures. Now here's what changes when you use the median instead. Jenna's household. Sitting somewhere in the low 6 figures with a paid-down car and a retirement account that's finally gaining momentum isn't behind at all. She's close to right in the middle of the pack. That's not a consolation prize. That's just accurate information. And accurate information is the only thing that lets you make good decisions. So before anyone can talk about climbing toward the next net worth milestone, this has to be the starting point. Not the fantasy number the news throws around, but the real one. The one that reflects where most people actually stand. Because if you're benchmarking yourself against a distorted average, every milestone ahead is going to feel unreachable, when really you might be a lot closer to the first real threshold than you think. And that first threshold is exactly where the math starts changing in your favor. Level 1, the brutal math of $100,000. Charlie Munger used to say the first $100,000 was the hardest money he ever made, and by the time he died, He was worth more than 2 billion. That should sound insane. Why would a man swimming in 9 figures still think about a number that small? Because he remembered what it felt like to not have it. And he understood something about money that most people never get taught. It doesn't grow the same way the whole time. In the beginning, it barely grows at all. Then, at a certain point, it starts growing almost on its own. Here's the tool that explains it, something called the Rule of 72. It's a quick way to figure out how long it takes money to double at a given rate of return. Take 72, divide it by your interest rate, and that's roughly your number of years. At a steady 7% average return, which is close to the long-run stock market average, your money doubles roughly every 10 years. Now here's the part that actually matters. Doubling a small pile of money and doubling a massive pile of money takes the exact same amount of time. The only difference is what that doubling is worth in dollars. Take Devin Marsh, a warehouse supervisor in Columbus. Devin has finally saved up $100,000. At 7%, that grows by about $7,000 this year. That's decent. Maybe it covers a used Honda Accord. But picture Devin's regional manager who's sitting on $5 million. That same 7% return hands him $350,000 this year without him lifting a finger. Same percentage. Same amount of effort. Wildly different outcome. That's not because the manager is smarter or working harder. It's because his pile of money is bigger, and a bigger pile compounds into bigger numbers. This is exactly why that first 100,000 feels so disproportionately hard. You're doing all the effort, all the discipline, all the sacrifice, while your money is barely contributing anything back. You're basically pushing a boulder up a hill by yourself. But once you cross that line, the boulder starts helping you push. Compounding stops being background noise and starts becoming a real financial force. And it's not just your bank account that notices. Institutions notice too. Once you cross 6 figures in savings and investments, banks quietly start treating you like a lower risk. Devin might start seeing his $18 monthly maintenance fee disappear without even asking. Walk into a dealership to finance a car, and instead of getting offered a 7% auto loan, you might get quoted 5%. Because your file now says you're someone who pays things back. That gap alone can save thousands of dollars over the life of a loan. Premium credit card offers start showing up in the mailbox instead of the shredder. None of this means you've made it. You're not getting a private banker or an invitation to some exclusive dinner. But you've stepped out of the waiting room everyone starts in and into a slightly nicer one. More importantly, you've crossed the exact point where your money stops being a passive record of your effort and starts becoming a second income source, quietly working in the background whether you're clocked in or not. And once that shift happens, the next threshold looks completely different. Level 2, crossing into VIP treatment. Somewhere in Greenwich, Connecticut, there's a woman who just bought a $2.3 million waterfront home on Field Point Road, and she didn't sell a single share of stock to do it. Not one. So how exactly do you buy a multi-million-dollar house with money that, on paper, never left the market? Hold that thought, because to understand it, you first need a reality check about what $1 million actually buys today. If a millionaire in 1990 had the same buying power as someone with about $2.5 million today, that tells you something important. $1 million used to mean over-the-top luxury. Today, it means something quieter. If you follow the standard 4% withdrawal rule, a $1 million portfolio generates about $40,000 a year. That's real, dependable money. It means you're probably not panicking over a surprise transmission repair. But you're also not chartering a Gulfstream G280 to Aspen for the weekend. It's stability, not spectacle. Here's what's interesting, though. Even with that inflation reality check, crossing the $1 million mark is still the point where the system stops treating you like an account number. Take Renee Castillo, a hospital administrator who crossed 7 figures in investable assets last year. Almost overnight, she got pulled off the automated customer service line and handed an actual human relationship manager, someone who knows her name and her goals, not just her account number. At a bank like Chase, that shift comes with a title: private client. Monthly fees, the kind everyone else quietly pays without noticing, disappear completely. Wire transfers are free. ATM fees anywhere in the world get refunded. And she now has access to real tax planning, not just a generic online calculator. But the biggest shift isn't the perks, it's the strategy. Once you're at this level, you stop thinking about your assets the way most people do. Here's where it gets strange. When someone like Renee needs a large sum of cash, say, for that waterfront property in Greenwich, she doesn't sell her investments. Selling triggers capital gains taxes, and worse, it pulls that money out of the market permanently, killing its ability to keep compounding. Instead, she uses something called a securities-backed line of credit. She borrows against her portfolio directly, at an interest rate currently sitting around 6%, while her investments stay fully invested and untouched. Think about what that actually means. Her money is doing two things at once. It's sitting in the market, still growing at an average of 7% a year, while she's simultaneously spending against it through the loan. As long as her portfolio's growth outpaces the loan's interest rate, she comes out ahead on both sides. It's not a loophole. It's just a completely different relationship with money, one where your wealth never has to stop working just because you need to use some of it. That's the real shift at this level. Money stops being something you spend down and starts being something you spend around. And once you go beyond this level entirely, the game changes again in a way most people never even get to see. Level 3, $5 million and freedom. There's a specific number in federal securities law, $5 million, that legally changes what kind of investor you're allowed to be, not what you can afford, what you're legally permitted to access. So what exactly opens up once you cross it? Let's start with what life actually looks like there. At that same 4% withdrawal rule, $5 million generates about $200,000 a year, without touching the principal, without working a single hour. At that point, work becomes genuinely optional, not in the aspirational someday sense, in the actual today sense. Take Holly Bennett, a former pharmaceutical sales director who crossed this threshold 2 years ago. She still works, technically, 3 days a week, consulting for a company she likes. But here's what changed. She negotiates from a position of total calm. When her firm floated a lowball rate on a new contract, she said no and meant it, because she genuinely didn't need the deal. And here's the strange part. That kind of calm tends to earn people more respect, not less. Nobody can pressure someone who doesn't need anything from them. At this level, the banking relationship changes shape entirely too. Instead of a private client relationship manager, Holly now works with an actual private bank, the kind of institution like JP Morgan Private Bank or Goldman Sachs, that comes with lifestyle concierge services, arranging private jet charters on something like a Cessna Citation Latitude for a family trip, or handling logistics most people would spend a full weekend sorting out themselves. But the real unlock at this level isn't the concierge service. It's a legal classification most people have never heard of, called qualified purchaser status. Here's how it actually works. Once your investable assets cross $5 million, federal law reclassifies you. You're no longer just an investor. You're now legally permitted to access private equity funds, venture capital deals, and off-market real estate opportunities, the kind of deals that are, by law, closed to everyday investors. It's not about connections or who you know. It's a hard regulatory line. Below it, those doors are legally locked to you. No matter how smart or well-connected you are, above it, they're not. So opportunities that used to require someone to like you enough to let you in now start finding their way to you simply because you're allowed to be in the room. A private equity manager raising a new fund isn't chasing $5,000 checks. They're looking for qualified purchasers who can write 6- and 7-figure checks. And now, that's you. It sounds like the finish line, doesn't it? Concierge travel, 6 figures in passive income, deals nobody else can even access. And in a lot of ways, it is a genuine milestone, one that took real discipline and real years to reach. But here's what nobody puts in the brochure. Crossing this threshold doesn't just change what opportunities come find you. It changes who else comes find you. And not all of it is good news. The hidden cost of getting rich. There's an actual clinical term for what happens to people right after they get rich: sudden wealth syndrome. And doctors see the same symptoms whether it's a lottery winner or a startup founder who just had a 9-figure exit. So what does that actually look like in real life? Take Grant Ferris, a mid-level engineer who sold his stake in a small logistics startup for $4.2 million last year. Within about 2 weeks of the news getting out, his phone turned into something unrecognizable. A cousin he hadn't spoken to since a wedding in 2018 texted him about a can't-miss real estate deal in Scottsdale. A guy from his old college fraternity, someone he hadn't heard from in over a decade, suddenly wanted to grab dinner. Charities he'd never donated to somehow had his email address. Here's what's actually happening underneath all of that. The money itself didn't ruin anything. What it did was drop a massive, unfamiliar weight onto a psychological structure that was never built to carry it. Grant told a friend later that he started screening every call, wondering what people actually wanted from him. That's not paranoia for no reason. That's a rational response to a very real pattern. And it gets more complicated than just fielding requests from distant relatives. There's a well-known phenomenon in psychology called crab bucket mentality. Picture an actual bucket of live crabs. Any single crab could technically climb out on its own, but the second one starts climbing, the others grab onto it and pull it back down. Not out of strategy, just instinct. People do the exact same thing, usually without even realizing it. As Grant's net worth changed, something uncomfortable happened with his oldest friendships. He noticed he stopped getting invited to the casual Friday night poker games he used to host every month. When he did get invited to dinner, there was this awkward, unspoken tension around the check. Like everyone assumed he'd just cover it now. Or worse, resented him a little either way. Nobody said anything outright. It was quieter than that. His success had become a silent commentary on everyone else's situation staying the same. And some people couldn't sit comfortably with that. Here's the uncomfortable part. Most personal finance content skips entirely. Wealth earns you enormous respect from strangers. Bankers, dealerships, entire institutions start treating you differently, exactly the way we walked through earlier. But that same wealth can quietly cost you comfort with the people who knew you before any of it happened. That's a real trade-off, not a hypothetical one, and it rarely gets mentioned next to the exciting parts about private banking and off-market real estate deals. Grant didn't stop being close with everyone, but the friendships that survived were the ones that could hold an honest conversation about money instead of pretending it didn't exist. The ones that couldn't quietly faded, and that hurt more than any of the tax paperwork. So the real question isn't just how to get to the next number. It's what you do once you're standing there, watching your bank account and your social circle move in opposite directions. And that question leads somewhere most people never actually stop to think about: setting your own finish line. There's a survey that gets run almost every year asking Americans one simple question: how much money would it take for you to feel truly wealthy? And here's the strange part. No matter how much people already have, the answer is almost always about double whatever that person currently holds. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern worth understanding. Take Dana Whitfield, a marketing director who spent years chasing a specific number, $1 million, convinced that once she hit it, the anxiety around money would finally quiet down. She hit it last spring. For about 3 weeks, she genuinely felt it, that sense of having arrived. Then she went to a friend's birthday dinner and casually found out that friend's household was sitting closer to $2.5 million. And just like that, Dana felt behind again, in the exact same body, with the exact same $1 million that had felt like plenty 3 weeks earlier. Nothing about her actual life had changed. Only her comparison point had. That's the trap. And it's not a Dana problem. It's a universal one. Whatever number people define as wealthy has a strange habit of sprinting away exactly as fast as people approach it. Climb the ladder your whole life, waiting for the moment it finally feels like enough. And there's a real chance that moment never arrives, no matter how many rungs you clear. So here's the actual mechanism worth understanding after everything we've covered today. The 3 thresholds we walked through: the first 100,000, the millionaire shift, the 5 million mark. They're not really about hitting a magic number that unlocks permanent peace of mind. They're about function. They describe what actually becomes possible at each stage. When institutions start treating you differently, when compounding starts pulling real weight, when you gain legal access to opportunities that were previously closed to you. That's useful, concrete information. What they can't do is hand you the feeling of enough. That part isn't a financial calculation. It's a decision made on purpose, usually before the number ever arrives, not after. Think about your own number for a second. Is there an actual dollar figure attached to it? Or is it just a vague, moving sense of more? Because if it's the second one, no threshold on this list is going to fix that. Not the 100,000, not the 5 million, not even the 10 million after that. Dana eventually landed on something specific. She decided that for her, enough meant having 18 months of expenses sitting liquid, contributing enough monthly to stay on track for retirement at 60, and having the freedom to take a real 2-week vacation without checking her email once. not a dollar figure pulled from a magazine. A definition she built herself, based on her actual life. That's the real move here. Decide what enough looks like for you, specifically, before the banking system, the algorithms, or the person next to you at a dinner party defines it instead. Because if you don't set that line yourself, it will keep moving forever, and you'll spend your whole life climbing toward a version of wealth that was never actually yours to begin with. So here's the question worth sitting with long after this video ends. What is your enough? The number was never the point. So here's the thing that actually explains everything we walked through today. Money doesn't just grow the more you have. It behaves differently at different heights. And at each threshold, the world quietly starts treating you like a different person. That's not random. It's math, incentives, and regulation working exactly as designed. A few things worth holding on to. The median tells you the truth. The average tells you a story. Compounding needs a base before it can do any real work. Every level up trades one kind of comfort for a new kind of pressure. And enough is a decision, not a destination. Next time you catch yourself comparing your progress to someone else's number, ask where that number actually came from and whether it was ever really yours. If this changed how you think about your own progress, leave a comment with where you'd place yourself on this ladder right now. Share it with someone climbing the same one, and stick around. Because next time, we're breaking down exactly what happens the moment your first 100,000 starts compounding on its own.